With Christmas just days away, I'm digging deep into the memory and the family photo album to share with you my top 5 favourite Christmas presents of my childhood. What's going on, guys? Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you're enjoying the holidays. However it is you do it, I hope you're having a blast. I'm a big Christmas guy. Even now, approaching 40 years old, I still get deep into the Christmas spirit. I love the Christmas movies, playing the Christmas music, getting the decorations up, trying to keep those family traditions going. I love all that stuff. But, you know, as much as I continue to fly the flag for Christmas into adulthood, there's just nothing like the Christmases of your childhood. They were the best, and no matter how hard we try, you just can't replicate that feeling. So Christmas is important to me now. It was important to me as a kid, and also being a vintage toy collector, those Christmas mornings had a really big impact on the connection that I have with the toys and with the era. So I'm really excited today to share with you guys my top 5 favourite Christmas presents of my childhood, share some memories, share some photos, and we'll count those down. So that's what we're doing today. But any top 5 or top 10 has to have some honourable mentions. I'm going to flip the script on you guys and give you some dishonourable mentions, because I'm sure we've all got these stories where Santa Claus didn't quite get it right. So I thought I'd share a couple of those with you. For our first dishonourable mention, we're going all the way back to Christmas morning of 1992, almost 30 years to the day, but I still remember it. So if I can set the scene for you guys, I was about 6 to 8 months into my love affair with the world of pro wrestling. I was introduced to the WWF earlier that year with the 1992 Royal Rumble, and having rented the WWF VHS tapes and picked up the WWF magazine from the news agency, both of those just hammered into me ads for the Hasbro wrestling figures, a fantastic figure line. I've got a bunch of them you can see behind me, you know, a line that's got a big collector community and was just massive in the 90s. So when I picked up from under that tree what felt quite obviously like a carded action figure, I was expecting to see that bright blue card back, that beautiful WWF logo, and names like Hulk Hogan or Macho Man Randy Savage. Instead, I got a pair of no-name knockoff Soma World Wrestlers, where I was hoping to see Hulk Hogan. I saw Iron Mask, where I was hoping to see Macho Man Randy Savage. I saw Jackie Jade, two legends of the game, Iron Mask and Jackie Jade. Now the interesting thing is, as I get deeper into collecting vintage action figures, those two figures that I spurned back in the day have become almost a grail piece for me now because of the nostalgia that I have for them. So what happened back in the day, guys, was I discarded the figures pretty much immediately. I'll show you a photo here where my brother is looking absolutely psyched and I'm looking less than impressed. And if you look in the bottom left corner of that photo, you will see those two carded Soma wrestling figures. Now, they didn't totally go to waste because the Soma World Wrestling figure line comes with awesome robe accessories and belts, and those robes and belts got used later on when I got the Hasbros. But you know, it's funny for me that those figures that got discarded on Christmas morning are now right up there on my grail list of figures that I'm trying to get. So if anyone out there who's located in Australia sees Soma World Wrestlers, in particular the two legends of the game, Iron Mask and Jackie Jade, let me know, because I'm trying to scoop those up and add them to the collection. So there's the first dishonourable mention. Now for the second one, before we rip into the top 5, I'll be quick with this one. We go forward a few years to Christmas morning of 1997. I'm 13 years old at this point in time, so I'm no longer playing with action figures. I'm sure I'm still playing the Super Nintendo if the PlayStation 1 hadn't arrived yet, but my big thing was I was into sport, and my outdoor activity of choice was mountain biking. We lived in a great suburban area with a state forest nearby, and any chance I got, I'd be on the bike riding the local trails. Now what I really wanted that year was a VHS tape of, you know, a mountain biking hype reel. The tape was called Chain Smoke. In fact, you know what? I wouldn't mind trying to get this VHS in my collection now. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. So once again, under the tree, I feel a VHS tape. I must have asked a million times for Chain Smoke. But what do I rip open? I rip open, randomly, Twister. Something I hadn't asked for, a film I don't even think I'd seen at this point in time, so it was one of those real random things. And as far as I can remember, I wasn't the type of kid to to complain or you know, I would try and hide my disappointment and be grateful with what I got. But I think in this photo you can see that I'm not exactly jazzed with my Christmas present. But once again, just like I'm now chasing the Soma World Wrestling figures, Twister is now one of my favorite movies. I've got it on VHS in my collection. I've got an ex-rental copy and I love it. I love Twister. It's one of my favorite 90s movies. It's probably my favorite rainy day or bad weather movie. When it's shitty weather here in Sydney, I love to throw that on. So yeah, look, for whatever reason, it's become one of my favorite movies, but I remember being less than blown away to rip that bad boy open in 1997. So there's a couple of dishonorable mentions for you. Now let's get stuck into the top 5. Kicking us off with number 5, we're going back to Christmas morning of 1992. The disappointment with those Soma World Wrestling figures was very short-lived, because I ripped open one of the most memorable Christmas presents of my childhood, the AFX Ghost Racer slot car set. Now, it's a toy, it's an item that I've spoken about on this channel before. I did a video dedicated to my pursuit and finding the Ghost Racer set at a flea market here in Sydney. So I won't tread over old ground too much, but if I'm honest, I hadn't asked for the Ghost Racer. I believe I'd asked for the Thunderloop Thriller, but I just had, once I clicked that track together and my brother and I got to racing, because I think this might have been one of those shared gifts where it's, you know, for you and your brother. But once we got it together and started racing and started having a good time, I very much forgot about the Thunderloop Thriller and just had a great time with it. Like I said, I have done a video before dedicated to the Ghost Racer, so I won't go too much into it, but for those of you that haven't seen it, essentially the play feature of the Ghost Racer is a computer-powered player 2 car. So if you're playing on your own, you can turn the computer action on and you know, you can have fun on your own. Now for me, with a younger brother, I could just put the computer car on and he thought he was controlling it, and I had a respectable level of competition for my slot car action, and it was awesome. I remember getting it together on Christmas morning and it was set up in the living room on Christmas Day and probably into Boxing Day. But I've also got a photo which I'll share with you here of my mum playing it in our outdoor area. Well, this was probably my favorite of my childhood homes because we moved around a little bit, and I remember we had an outdoor area that was undercover, and as you can see in this photo, we had the Ghost Racer slot car set up outside and we were just having a good fun old time as a family. So the AFX Ghost Racer is definitely one of my favorite Christmas presents of my childhood, and like I mentioned, I have it in the collection. So I've got it complete in box, super nostalgic box. The box is a bit knocked around, and the slot car set definitely needs some love. It ain't exactly in perfect working order, but look, it's a display piece. And what I will say while I'm talking about the Ghost Racer is the video where I covered this was called Slot Car Grail Fail, because I bought this under the assumption that it worked and it didn't. But the cool thing is I want to shout out like all of the people that left comments of advice. The slot car community rallied around me and gave me some awesome advice. And I'm going to be real with you guys, if any of you are watching now, I haven't followed your advice. This was last year, and I really haven't had time to set it up and you know, get the tools out and get that working. But I really appreciate that advice, and one day we will, and there'll be a part 2 to the slot car grail fail video. So that is number 5, the AFX Ghost Racer slot car set. Next up for number 4, we go back a few years to Christmas morning of 1988. Now, if this were a countdown of my top 5 favourite Christmases of my childhood, 1988 would have to rank fairly highly. This was the only Christmas that I remember where we lived on our farm. We used to have a farm on the outskirts of Sydney for a short period of time. We were living there, and this was awesome. We had a bunch of our family staying with us on the farm. And the most notable event, in addition to the gift, which I'll tell you about in just a moment, was that we had a visit from Santa Claus on Christmas morning, maybe late in the morning. I'll show you guys a photo here with me and a couple of my cousins getting a gift from Santa. I didn't find out until years later that was my uncle dressing up as Santa to light up our Christmas morning, but it was just one of those awesome childhood memories, and it certainly made the Christmas all the more special. But from a Christmas gift standpoint, the major gift that year was actually my very first Lego set. It was my introduction to Lego with the Lego Camouflaged Outpost, which I believe was from the Castle line of Lego as part of the Forestman series in the late 80s. Now at the time I was big into Robin Hood, and this just kind of dovetailed in with that perfectly. But like I said, it was my very first introduction to Lego, and I just had tons of fun with that set, and it was the starting point for like a childhood love of Lego. Later I got really deep into Pirates Lego. Lego is one of those things that was a big part of my childhood, but I just haven't taken my collection in that direction. At some stage I would love to start a vintage 80s early 90s pirate Lego collection, but between the prices and the space it takes up, I just haven't brought myself to, to go down that road just yet. But Lego was something that was a big part of my childhood, and it all started on that Christmas 1988 with the camouflaged Outpost set. And that's why it's top 4 on my list. Next up, for number 3, we go back to Christmas of 1992 once again. So when we were talking about the Soma wrestling figures, I mentioned my newfound love and obsession with the world of the WWF. Well, imagine my delight when I ripped open not only the boxed original Game Boy, but also the WWF Superstars game for that Game Boy. In fact, you don't have to imagine my delight, you can see this photo right here. The photo definitely says it all in this case, and it was just awesome. I remember that year we went to my auntie and uncle's place nearby for Christmas lunch, and for the first time having that handheld console that I could bring with me. I remember being incredibly antisocial that Christmas day while everyone was outside swimming in the pool and enjoying lunch outdoors in my auntie and uncle's backyard. I was being very antisocial indeed. I was inside in the living room playing WWF Superstars on Game Boy, occasionally begrudgingly letting one of my cousins have a turn before, impatiently tapping my foot and demanding it back. So just awesome, the best memories. And I was absolutely stoked a couple of years ago to come across this, the same version of the Game Boy in the exact same box with the built-in Tetris. But not only that, I've also got the WWF Superstars loose cart. I really do want to get that same box for this game, purely because of that photo, because of the memories. I've spoken about retro video games on the channel before. I'm trying to, reassemble just the games I had as a kid, and that's all. That's really where I'm taking it. The games that I had as a kid, the games that I played regularly, that I rented from the video store, and that's pretty much it. WWF Superstars was top of the list. I was stoked to get this, but I do want to try and get that box. I'm not really chasing many boxes for my retro games, but this is one that I definitely do want to get. That beautiful artwork is just like seared into my memory, so I'm definitely keen to get the box. So number 3 on the list is the original Game Boy with WWF Superstars. For number 2 on the list, we're actually sticking with 1992. I mentioned earlier that if I was doing a top 5 favourite Christmases countdown, 88 would be up there. 1992 would probably take the cake, but I'm cheating a little bit with this one because this gift came a couple of days after Christmas. So once we were done with Christmas lunch, once the batteries on the Game Boy were flat, a couple of days after Christmas, we travelled down to Canberra to spend some time with my mum's side of the family. And we stayed with one of my auntie and uncles and my cousins. And my cousin was a few years older than me, the same cousin that introduced me to Dino Riders and Masters of the Universe. He had the Hasbro wrestling figures, that I'd asked for, but instead received the Soma World Wrestlers. You can just imagine going into his bedroom, seeing what he's got, and he had the Hasbro wrestling ring and the Hasbro wrestling figures. Probably about 7 or 8 of them. And regardless of what was going on, throughout the few days that we stayed with my family, I was playing with the Hasbros and having an absolute ball. And I don't know how this happened. I mean, I'm grateful it did, but I don't know how this happened. But once we piled in the car to road trip it back to Sydney, the Hasbros and the ring came with me, and I couldn't believe it. Maybe I asked for them. I don't know. I don't know how it happened. I just remember going down to Canberra, playing with the Hasbros for a few days, and then the Hasbros coming home with me. As you can see behind me, I collect the Hasbros. They're one of my favorite toy lines to collect. They were probably the defining action figure line of my childhood, if not the Ninja Turtles. But in collecting the Hasbros, I have my childhood collection. Not the same figures, they were sold in a garage sale, but the same individual figures have been reacquired for my collection, and I'll take you through that childhood fig fed right now. And here we have it, the childhood fig fed. So we've got the original bright blue, visually iconic Hasbro wrestling ring, obviously with the flag snapped off because that was how my childhood version was. We've got the Hulkster, the Series 2 Hulk Hogan, Hacksaw Jim Duggan without the 2x4 accessory. Obviously that was lost by my older cousin. We've got the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase minus his $1 Million Championship belt accessory. Obviously that got lost. We've got the Bushwhackers. We've got the Rockers. And last but not least, we've got the Macho King Randy Savage, the Macho King version of the Macho Man Randy Savage, obviously without the crown and scepter accessories because they were lost by my older cousin. So there we go, we had 8 figures and the original Hasbro wrestling ring, and it was awesome. So there we have it, the original Hasbro Childhood Fig Federation, the 8 figures and the ring, knocked around, lost accessories, hand-me-down from an older cousin, but still some of my favourite toys of my childhood. That's number 2 on the list. That started the childhood collection, and those memories made the Hasbros, like I said, some of my favourite toys of my childhood. And for number 1, my favourite Christmas present of my childhood, we go to Christmas morning of 1993 with the Super Nintendo. Now, at this point in my childhood, I was obsessed with video games. I had the Sega Master System too, but the enthusiasm was probably running a little bit dry for that. Obviously the Game Boy the previous year, I was still playing the heck out of that. But one thing at this point in my childhood that I loved to do was to ride my bike down to the local community village shops and go into the video store and dump 20-cent coins into the Street Fighter 2 arcade. It was just so good. Street Fighter 2 was all the rage at school. It was all anyone spoke about as it related to video games. And at that point in time, with the Super Nintendo arriving in Australia, just the concept of a 16-bit home arcade system that I could play Street Fighter 2 on for free with as many continues as I wanted, like that was just mind-blowing. And that was top of the Christmas wish list. And you know, when I think back to the holiday period of 1993, I must have been pretty confident that that was under the tree, because this is really weird, but I have like a memory of approaching things in my life that I wasn't that enthusiastic about. Like Christmas is obviously summer in Australia, and I remember going to swimming lessons, going to swimming class, or like competition swimming, and just being not that enthusiastic about it. And I remember thinking to myself, like, just think of the Super Nintendo, think of Street Fighter, like, just think of you living the life on Christmas morning. And the other cool part about the experience of the Super Nintendo and Street Fighter 2 was actually the fact that I had just recently had a TV put into my bedroom for the first time. So we upgraded our family TV, which meant the old family TV went into my parents' room, which meant my parents' old TV went into my room. So not only was I busting open a Super Nintendo on Christmas morning, but that thing was getting plugged straight into my little tiny 11-inch CRT TV in my bedroom, and it was just living like a king on Christmas morning. So, but not only that, as you can see in this photo right here, if you look very closely, obviously I'm not particularly enthusiastic about this photo as well, but I'm going to try and zoom this in for you. You can see the Super Nintendo on the floor. It's a little bit concealed by some wrapping paper, but not only do we have that, we also have another game that I was totally not expecting, which was the WWF Royal Rumble, the latest WWF video game. And that was awesome. I remember actually having like a proper Christmas morning conundrum, like what do I do first? Do I do Street Fighter? Do I do Royal Rumble? And it was just the best. It was the best, and that's why it is number 1 on my list. That's why it's my favorite Christmas present of my childhood. And not only was it my favorite Christmas present of my childhood, it's my favorite video game console to play nowadays in 2022. I'm still grinding it out with the Super Nintendo, and when I do, chances are I'm playing Street Fighter 2 or I'm playing WWF Royal Rumble, 2 of my favorite games to play on Super Nintendo. I'm not much of a gamer, I've mentioned that before, but when it comes to playing video games, it's all nostalgia for me. And it doesn't get much more nostalgic than these 2 games. So there you have it. So there you have it for my top 5 favorite Christmas presents of my childhood. Interestingly, especially when you look behind me, not too much in the way of 80s and 90s action figures. They were definitely there, but when I think about my favorite Christmas presents of my childhood, I think about those bigger ticket items, the video game consoles, the big slot car set, the big Lego set, which kicked off the love of Lego, and of course, the bulk lot of Hasbro wrestling figures handed down from my cousin over to me as a belated Christmas present. So there you have it for my top 5, but I would love to hear from you guys as to what your favorite Christmas presents of your childhood were. If you've got enduring memories of certain toys that you were absolutely stoked to rip open on Christmas morning, or if you got funny stories of where Santa Claus didn't quite get it right, I'd love to hear those as well. Or if you got a top 5, definitely drop those for me down below. So I hope to hear from you in the comments, or you can hit us up on Instagram at Crusher Collects. Also, if you guys have photos from back, you know, Christmas morning, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, ripping open your favorite toy or standing in front of your new Christmas present, proud as punch. I love seeing that stuff from when we were kids. So if you've got those and you want to share them, you can certainly tag me on Instagram at Crusher Collects, or you can DM them to me, and if you're comfortable, I'd love to share it. I love seeing those awesome moments from back in the day caught on those awesome, classic 70s, 80s, 90s photos. So definitely you can catch us on Instagram at Crusher Collects. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far, you're a dead set champion. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you and your families have a really Merry Christmas. And until next time, cheers.